Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining today for the MSP Playbook webinar. Very much appreciated. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is David Weeks. I'm the team lead and senior channel salesperson for Naval Technologies. As well, I also have Jamie Smith with us. Jamie is our manager of the sales engineering department, and as well he was instrumental in the development of this MSP Playbook. So, we appreciate that everybody's very busy, so, we very much do want to say thank you for taking the time to come today. What I want to do is give a quick overview of why it is that we developed the MSP Playbook. Initially, this was developed in regards to having some different types of customers who were coming on board with Naval Technologies who are now moving into the managed services space. As a result, we started to build out a methodology to assist them to make that transition over. Within that work, and as we developed this book, primarily over about the last year, what we found was that a lot of our partners, existing partners, had a need for this type of documentation and this methodology to help them improve their overall managed services practice as well. So we're happy to announce that the MSP Playbook is now officially launched. This is available for purchase from partners, and we'll get deeper into what it is that we're including in this in a moment. Really, the idea behind this is in terms of understanding on the front end what is the best business practice for my organization as a managed service provider. And when we look at that, really what we would need to understand is an overview of a managed services provider, and what does that really mean in terms of what it is that you're providing out there to your customer base, and having that understanding in terms of some of the keys to success. Really knowing and understanding, for instance, that change is easily embraced and expected. Looking to seek out and participate in industry peer groups. So, in regards to all of that information, what it is that you want to look at is, have we really driven and thought about it on our end in regards to what it is that we want to provide back as a managed service provider to our customers? I'm going to jump quickly here into the different types of offerings that we've put together. Some of them, for many of you, will be quite common, but I think there'll be some new offerings that we've put together that I think will fit your needs quite well. After that, I'm going to hand things over to Jamie Smith, and Jamie's going to take you through the service desk and the network operations side and the methodology that we put together there. We were lucky enough to bring in one of the top consultants in the world to help us build out that methodology on the back end. So really, this is based on an ITIL process, so we know that it's solid in terms of the foundations that you'll be able to put in place as you go forward and you start to implement this within your own organization. I think what you'll find at the end of this is ultimately what it is that you're going to receive is you're going to receive a business plan to be able to go to market or to improve your existing practice as you move forward. Not only on a business front end, but as well on a costing level, on a marketing level, and also looking deeper into that on the back-end service delivery side, where we see as one of the major areas of concern or of issue for managed service providers that we talk to on a regular basis. So when we look at the different types of service offerings, typically what you would see us talk about in the past would be the a la carte methodology and being able to go to market with that and utilizing those essentials licenses and aligning different types of needs to a business requirement, such as antivirus, such as backup, such as patch services, etc. From there, you would look at the proactive program, and that proactive program was the idea of performance-based monitoring with a preventative maintenance component, and additional support on an emergency level and so forth would be billed as required. Then we would look at the overall managed program, which is that fully outsourced option. New into the fray now, and obviously an area that is here that everybody is aware of, is the cloud side. And what we've done is we've put together a cloud program, and you're going to see that there's a cultural and a transactional shift in the way that we've built that out. And then we have the supplemental, and supplemental was typically a standard ASP model. I'll jump into that as well today and show you that. We've brought in a new program now that will allow you to play upstream into the mid-enterprise and enterprise type markets. So if, for instance, I look first at a proactive program, what it is that we're providing here on the proactive side is an understanding of what that program really means. What is a proactive program? What is the value proposition, and what are the results of delivering that type of service offering out to your customers? From there, what we take you into is some of that industry average pricing, and that industry average pricing was done through an analysis of all of the different information that we had over the years of working with partners around the world. So again, this is not what we're saying to you that you go to market with. We just know that this is an average price that you can build off of. You would work with your partner development specialist as needed, and they'll help you customize this as required. Then what we talk to are some of the included services. So for instance, if I'm looking at going out to market at $100 a server on a proactive program, what does that really mean? What am I providing back to the customer? And what we're looking at here are things like advanced performance monitoring, key application maintenance, schedule preventative maintenance, etc. But again, that's fairly high level. So just being finalized right now, and this will be within the playbook, probably within the next week and a half, will be a full scope of work. And I can show you what that looks like. So for instance, if we were looking at a proactive program and how it is that we would deliver our service on a network device, there's several core areas that we need to analyze as we go through that. And really the idea is, what is going to be scoped in? What is it that we're going to be providing back on a network device? So for instance, we're going to provide 24/7 monitoring and alerting. We need to provide the ISP vendor management for the customer because we don't want them having to deal with those additional tech support issues. Proactive checks on the network devices, asset inventory, and then obviously getting into the reporting, which is critical to the accountability and driving the value back to the customers. When we look at some of that detailed scope of service, the idea is that if we're going to provide 24/7 monitoring and alerting, where do we do that? Across what types of network devices? So here we're looking at switches, firewalls, routers, etc. And what we're talking about is the types of services that you will provide. So if we look at a firewall, we're going to do 24/7 monitoring and alerting. We're going to do the monitoring of internet bandwidth utilization and providing that back as a report to the customer. Firewall configuration, ISP vendor management, etc. So in here we're combining both the maintenance activity as well as the monitoring activity. But the idea behind it is that we're still fairly high level here in terms of what it is that we're recommending that you do. So what we need to do now is we need to provide you with those standard monitoring tools and the protocol that you'll put in place. So what we do is we jump now into what are those standard monitoring areas that you want to set up within N-Central, and N-Central really being the catalyst and the back end to all of this that we're putting forward today. So for instance, on switches, we're going to look at monitoring availability, CPU, memory, etc. along those lines. So now what we're doing is we're getting a lot more granular with you. And as we look at this, then what we do from that as we receive alerts and notifications is it's deemed whether that would go to the NOC or to a help desk depending on the type of issue. The main NOC deliverable here really is ensuring that they're following within the service level agreement for the customer, but as well understanding that you have a proper standard operating procedure that you've built into your NOC to ensure that you're triaging and managing those alerts and notifications as required. So for instance, if we're going to identify incoming alerts, we need to be able to figure out whether or not those are false alerts, whether or not those need to still sit in an analysis period for a while or a triage period, or do they need to be actioned on immediately, and where does that need to move? Does that need to be handled by an L1 type engineer who can run an automation policy or a script against it, or does that need to be escalated if it's a higher level issue? From there, what we get into, for instance, are things like ISP vendor management. We understand that ISP vendor management is critical in that if you through your monitoring of their connectivity realize that they're down and you need to get on the phone with the vendor to figure out a mean time to resolution and so forth to report back to your customer, The idea behind that with the NOC is they need to have a certain type of information readily available to get on the phone with those vendors. So we get right down to the granularity of the name of the ISP, the location of the client, the bandwidth and service plan details, and looking through some of those other areas and really understanding and ensuring through risk mitigation on your side that they have valid support contracts, etc. And this could even lead into further opportunity in sales if we start to realize that a highly sensitive customer doesn't have redundant lines in place and so forth. So we might look at that in terms of further mitigation moving forward. From there, what we would take you into is that proactive type management and the maintenance activities that we want to put in place. So if, for instance, we're looking at backup configuration of certain devices, the frequency of that would be every 15 days. Therefore, we want the NOC to schedule that through your PSA or ticketing system on the 1st and 16th of each month. Those tickets need to be closed out, and that's in a recurring activity that the NOC has to manage on a regular basis. And of course, always looking for efficiency here and automating where possible to increase your profitability as an organization and as an MSP, yet still provide that full value back to the end customer. Then what we'll take you into is the reporting side and really understanding some of that provisioning of devices as we put them out there. Asset inventory reporting, for instance, understanding that, having regular asset scans and intervals that we run to understand if new devices are brought into the environment so we can bring those under management and obviously increase our bill rate. Looking at provisioning exceptions. If we're going to have devices brought into an environment, for instance, that aren't SNMP enabled and we can't grab that info through those traps, what is it that we can do? Is there a way to mitigate and manage that on a different level? Or is that something that we don't want to scope into our agreement moving forward, and yet we'll just support as required on that? Then we'll take you into the support benchmarks and that service level agreement and working with you in terms of how is it that you want to respond based on your SLA during and after business hours. And the idea of if we're doing after business hours or 24/7, how do we follow the sun and so forth, and can we do that ourselves or do we need to outsource that? And really understanding the criticality of the issue that comes through and the sensitivity to the customer, ensuring that we're responding back quickly enough to alleviate and work to triage for them right away. From there, we're going to look into the escalation process and really understanding whether it's a critical, high, medium, or low. If it's critical, we need to utilize all communication methods that are available to us in terms of phone, email, and ticket. From that, what we need the ability to do is understand that a level 1 will hold on to that issue for a certain amount of time. Jamie will go more in depth into that. If they cannot resolve that issue, run an automation policy or a script against it, then they need to escalate as quickly as possible onto an L2. L2 has a set amount of time that they work on an issue before it goes to an L3. Primarily from there, the assumption is that an L3 at the highest level would resolve. However, if not, what are the next steps that we have to take? So we've looked further than that in terms of bringing in NOC supervisors, NOC managers, an MSP manager, ultimately working with technical support of a vendor, etc., to work to resolve issues as required as quickly as possible. So these scopes of works, as mentioned, will be available for several of the programs within the next week and a half or so within this document. They're just being finalized now. If I jump back into the MSP Playbook, as mentioned, we now have a new area in here in terms of the cloud side. And the cloud side is something that is here. It's emerging. More and more of your customers are starting to utilize cloud services, whether or not they're even have an understanding that they are to this point. But as an MSP, you need to be able to build this out and offer this service to your customers before the big players in the market jump in on it ahead of you. So with the cloud, what ultimately changes is that idea of computing anywhere and that understanding of being able to access your data as required. But what happens with that is, if you look at a cloud program, for instance, the majority of the infrastructure now moves off-site if we were going to do a really almost like a fully outsourced cloud program. And the idea behind it is that infrastructure as a service on the back end, providing them a virtual online workplace, doing their application management, providing that Microsoft Office suite, hosted Exchange, backup and DR, secure cloud storage, etc. On site, we typically still see the workstations there, whether or not that's a physical laptop or a virtual desktop type infrastructure. Therefore, we still have the ability for AB to manage, their AV to manage their mobile. And now we can start to provide the unlimited remote and on-site support, understanding that if all we really have left on site is a laptop or a workstation or a VDI type infrastructure, on-site should only ever really be required for hardware failure, which then falls underneath a warranty and support agreement through a vendor. So because of that, we can now start to provide guaranteed service levels back to our customer, which is somewhat unique now that we do that. The interesting part about this is that as that transactional value shifts from device management to end user experience, you notice here that in the previous different types of programs, we talked about per device type pricing that allowed you to build out to a monthly fee for your customer. What we see on cloud services is positioning this on a per user basis is more relevant for the end customer. Again, back to the understanding of it's all about end user experience. When I come in the morning and I fire up my computer, how quickly can I access all of my documentation, my email, etc. through an online portal? That's the experience that I understand. We no longer see the server or the network infrastructure on site. As well, at the end of each of these areas, we link you through to those marketing documents that most of you are aware of. And again, you can utilize all of these as needed through the MSP Sales and Marketing Digital Binder in the Resource Center. As discussed on the supplemental side, what we've typically talked about in the past was what we called the ASP model. And the ASP model as an application service provider was that you host and manage and central on the back end for a small internal IT team. And what you do with that is they get their own dashboard access, they get reporting as required, and you simply send off all of that monitoring to them. They filter through it and they decide what it is that they want to react to. You might be an escalation point if needed and you bill them as required, or they might ask for assistance where you can come in and provide them project work, etc. as needed. All of that, though, is an additional billable activity. New to this is something that we're seeing out there called managed monitoring and reporting. And this typically is a mid-enterprise to enterprise level type offering. We see that this fits well in the 350 to 500 plus seat range. Here you're going to have a large internal IT team in the range of 20, 30, 40, 50 people. However, that internal organization does not want to make the capital expenditure for enterprise level remote monitoring and management tools, especially since a lot of them are a single LAN solution and they might have global offices. As a result, as the MSP, you have the ability to bring them your enterprise level tool. You have the ability to set that up for them, work with them, develop that monitoring, notification, and alerting as needed. However, you've taken away the capital spend of buying a tool and you've moved it to an operating expense. The unique part here is that before all alerts go off to the internal IT team, your internal NOC will triage those alerts and deem what is necessary to be sent to the internal IT team. And this obviously would have regular configuration and changes made as needed. However, the value is there for that internal IT team. Something that you notice is that workstation's not included here. Typically the reason for that is because the larger organizations have an internal help desk, but they don't necessarily have an internal NOC. So as a result, an upsell opportunity in the future is to do things like outsourced help desk at a per user price. But the managed monitoring and reporting, if for instance our NOC is managing and triaging that for them on just the alerts coming in and notifications, for instance, if we're sending off critical, emergency, and warning alerts that may lead to a bigger issue at a later point, what we do with the non-critical issues is we roll those up into reporting and we send it to them at the end of the month or bi-weekly or whatever might be required. As well, they get access to you on a level 3 instance as required. You could work for them on holidays, sickness, churn, etc. And really all of that just gives you the ability to come in and start to improve the way that they deliver internally their managed services and help them utilize your tool and your RMM and your skill set as required. From that, obviously, there's the ability then for project support, custom services, etc. When we look at this, ultimately the supplemental, the cloud in many instances, and even a la carte are all a la carte type offerings. They all have a customization point to it based on your customer requirements. Where proactive and managed tend to be a little bit more static in terms of how it is that you develop and deliver those out to your end customers. What we do then is we roll all of this up into a line card for you. Again, industry average pricing, giving you the ability to see where your markup and margins could be, what your costs are on typically delivering those. And if you work with your partner development specialist, this line card is built into a fully usable and dynamic calculator that allows you to understand how we built out your total cost. That allows you to alter the amount of labor that you're imposing as you deliver this service, the cost that you might have on software or hardware, and as well looking at that overall pricing that you're going to put out to market. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to hand this over to Jamie Smith, and Jamie's going to take you through the back-end process side in terms of the service desk and the NOC.
So my name is Jamie Smith. I manage the SE team here globally. I've been at Enable for approximately 9 years now. And as my part in the MSP Playbook, I've actually been involved with working with clients just like yourself, as well as with the consultant, and establishing the framework with regards to a service desk as well as a NOC, differentiating between the two, putting some process around it, as well as some requirements for building a physical NOC. Okay. Now, with regards to differentiating between a service desk and a NOC, a lot of people will confuse the functionality of each. So a service desk is more of a reactive, responsive type service that is provided to the clients when there's a problem with the end users, desktops, things like that. The service desk is measured by KPI requirements and is very focused on customer-facing issues as well as ensuring satisfaction. So some of the things that we've actually put in here with regards to a service desk include responsibilities. So what are our service desk responsibilities? What type of things do they deal with? For specific applications, antivirus problems, can't perform a specific or problem with a piece of hardware, how that's dealt with. All the information with regards to how a service desk personnel would respond to this and how they would action it is all outlined in the playbook. Okay, how to communicate with the customers, how to keep them informed with regards to progress on a specific incident. This is outlined, as well as within the NOC itself, what are the responsibility of their personnel. So the NOC personnel would typically respond to alerts from Incentro based upon an SLA, depending upon the type of alert, whether or not, as Dave mentioned, you would perform remediation to try and gather the information, and then maybe it gets escalated to the service desk to deal with, especially if you have to respond to the incident or actually talk to the user themselves. Okay, and just a sample of how a call would flow. So with regards to a service request is received from a service desk or from a client, it comes in, initial assessment is done, triage is done, and if it's a hardware failure, for example, maybe that incident is escalated directly to the on-site team. Okay, so if you have an on-site team, for example, there's a disk failure, next scheduled visit, or if they are actually on-site, you schedule the disk to arrive there and it's replaced, cases closed. If it's escalated to a level 2, they'll do the triage, find out what the specific problem is. If it's like a server down, if it's a problem with the exchange, then maybe they escalate directly to a level 3. The key here is certain time limits that will actually be set for the different levels to make sure that this service desk is actually efficient or operating efficiently. So a lot of people with regards to a service desk will set a time limit that a level 1 can actually spend on an issue. So as they get issues in, they'll set a time limit of 20 minutes, for example, and if it's going to take longer than that, they'll automatically escalate to a level 2. We have information with regards to, as I mentioned, setting expectations for the end user, even how to set a voicemail so that if all your service desk representatives are busy, they'll get a voicemail that sets expectations that a callback will be done, for example, within 30 minutes. Okay? So the overview of the service desk is in here to make sure you can differentiate the functionality of a service desk from an actual network operations center or NOC. Then with regards to the NOC, we have information with regards to SLAs, specific pieces of hardware that they would deal with, the services that are provided. Obviously, you have to look at what your expertise or what expertise you have in-house before you decide which services you're going to deliver from a NOC perspective as well as from a service desk perspective. So focus on the hardware or any applications that you have expertise in and build your programs that Dave mentioned around those specific areas of expertise. How to deal with or how to create specific templates. So based upon those expertise, use your technicians, use your NOC staff, use your service desk personnel, as well as the best practices provided through Incentral, through service templates and remediation, and refine those templates to ensure that when a specific alert is received from Incentral, that you know how to, that situation is reacted to each time the same way. So from a NOC perspective, that would primarily be supporting the infrastructure and hardware, doing the client onboardings, things like that, making sure systems are patched. When they receive an alert, they know exactly what to do. So maybe a self-healing task is kicked off initially, which will grab the diagnostics that is needed for the NOC team to create a ticket for the service desk. Maybe remediation is kicked off initially and the problem is solved. Okay, so then the case is automatically closed. All the processes, all the information that is needed in order to establish this process within your NOC or within your service desk is all outlined within here. So other services that are provided, like when a client is onboarded, the NOC staff will primarily take care of that with regards to setting up the patch, setting up the antivirus, establishing the baseline with regards to what is actually being done at the client, and then once again the service desk is primarily dealing with reactive after the client has been onboarding. So with regards to staffing a service desk and staffing a NOC, looking for different traits with regards to a service desk personnel needs to be someone who can talk to people, who can interact with the client and ensure that they're providing the highest level of service. The staff for a NOC typically will not interact with the end user, so they're more process oriented. I like to say service desk would need a personality, whereas a NOC is essentially just following process from a specific run book to provide a solution to the customer. Then take a look at your supported systems. As I mentioned, ensure that what you're offering from a service desk and a NOC perspective is outlined in your SLA and is outlined specifically what you're going to cover. Then the templates are created, remediation set up, things along those lines. Reports and surveys. We have samples of reports as well as surveys with regards to showing the client that you're actually doing something. So important reports internally are the number of service tickets that are coming in, the number of service desk requests you're getting, how many people are going to voicemail. Like, we have different specifications with regards to the type of reports that you should be looking at. A lot of these people will set up or essentially gauge how they perform based upon these metrics. However, it's important to know each of the managers to fill out this information so they can actually present this to a director on how each of their departments is performing. Okay, so different samples of reports for that. From a NOC perspective, different reports on how quickly essentially issues are being responded to, how they're being remediated, what type of incidents are actually occurring within the environment, and all of this is going to be done through Incentral. With regards to, so you have the service desk established, you have the NOC established. Now you want to take a look at actually building the NOC. We have specific environmental requirements. Okay, so what you need to look at with regards to location. Who are you servicing? Are you going to cross multiple time zones? All of that is in there. Connectivity. How to staff, like I've mentioned, the difference between the person who would be a service desk representative and somebody who would be a NOC representative. How you staff for each. Communication within the NOC and the service desk. If you have a new offering, how do you communicate that to them so that they will service the specific process or offering specific to what your you've laid out with regards to the SLA. Qualifications for customers. Not all customers are going to fit your offering. So make sure that you don't try and mold the offering to fit something that you cannot support. Ensuring customer satisfaction. So surveys with regards to how are we performing, how did we resolve your issue from a service desk perspective, and then from a knock, once again, all of these specific reports will be drawn from or directly from Incentral. Okay? With regards to risk management, so how can you mitigate issues? What type of processes do you have in place? Service level management, capacity management. Based upon these reports, you'll be able to see what your current staff rate is as compared to the number of tickets and how you can grow or how you can offer. Security management. Okay? And then infrastructure qualification for the service, so ensuring that, each report, each customer has specific information that's going to be delivered to it, so that, once again, you can set the customer's expectations from a technical perspective and show them exactly what you're doing to ensuring their environment, whether it's a service desk or a knock, to help them with their business functions. Then we also have an actual glossary that has some examples on service offering agreements as well as service level agreements, as well as something called a hold harmless letter. So a lot of times within Incentral, you're in under SLA to deliver a specific service, and within that service it may go failed or it may malfunction. You identify that specific problem to a customer, and there's a cost associated with fixing it. Like maybe you have to buy a new application or warranty, or maybe you have to buy a new piece of hardware. They may not actually go for that specific upgrade at this time, but you're still in under SLA to fix the specific problem. What a hold harmless letter will do is it's something that you and the client will sign such that it's releasing you of that SLA responsibility for that specific issue. Okay? So very important with regards to ensuring that you're delivering in under your SLA and setting expectations between yourself and the customer. Taking a look at an overview of a service agreement. So when we're writing this, we're trying to decide whether or not we would include samples or if we would actually include specific points within a service level agreement or a service offering agreement, such that it would ask you all the questions and contain all the points that you should include when creating your own. So that's actually what we did. We created one for service offering agreement as well as a service level agreement. All the points that you should include, all the questions you should be asking yourself are included within this glossary and within this document, such that you can create your own and offer that to your customers as a solution.
Okay, it looks like we've covered everything off. Thank you again, everybody, for attending. Myself, David Weeks, and Jamie Smith, we very much appreciate it. Again, we understand how busy you all are. If you come through with more questions in terms of what it is that's provided and so forth here, or anything that you feel further that we can help with, feel free to contact Jamie or I, or as well you can contact your account manager and they'd be happy to discuss further as well. Thank you very much.